Friday. It's 11:30. It's time to party with your excellent host, Wayne Campbell. And with him, as always, is Garth.
Party on, Wayne, and party on, Garth.
Wayne's World!
Hi. Let's just get into it. Halo Infinite is on its way, grappling hooks and all, so YouTube's been recommending me a lot of videos related to the series. Most have just been memes or 20-second clips of gameplay, but one in particular intrigued me. It's a compilation of streamers encountering the Flood for the first time, with no prior knowledge of the infamous enemies, and though it's pretty long, I'd really recommend giving it a watch, as it does a really good job of showing what it's like the first time someone discovers the horrors of Halo's best levels. I'd also say, although I don't want to discourage people from watching my videos, that if you haven't played through the first game and do plan on it, maybe you just didn't get round to it yet, I don't know, I would stop watching this, go and play through it, and then come back. What I'm about to talk to you about is so good that I wouldn't want to deprive you of the first-hand experience with all of the spoilers that this video will contain. Halo's lore is far too complex for me to get into, or understand, so I'll mostly be describing and then looking in closer detail at what the level itself tells us. But to give a little background, humanity is at war with a coalition of alien species known as the Covenant. You play as a super soldier known as Master Chief, who in this particular mission has been sent to rescue a man named Captain Keyes. As you're flown to his squad's last known location, you see Covenant forces fleeing, which is somewhat bizarre, but doesn't quite draw your attention yet. You'd better investigate over that way, so you land in the forest, in the dark, and this is where the escalation really sets in. As some of you might remember from my Little Nightmares videos, escalation in horror, or in building tension, is key. And whilst it was almost perfectly measured in those scenes that I discussed from Little Nightmares 2, I would argue that it's even more effective here. Despite the lack of human companions throughout much of the game, there are normally enough of the colourful enemy forces to stave off the loneliness. Yet there's nothing about as you step into the swamp. Sure, there are some enemy encounters scattered throughout, but not right away, and nothing with the ferocity of previous levels. They seem almost distracted, depleted. Your combat-ready anticipation sours into anxiety as you realise that no group of grunts will come running around the corner to gleefully serve as simple target practice. No, this is something much darker that doesn't resemble the guns-blazing style of Covenant ground forces, and your fears are confirmed when a body suddenly drops from a cliff in front of you. It's an enemy, which should be comforting, but instead sows the seed of an idea. There's something worse here, lurking around the corner. Something that will make the rest of the game's enemies look like cartoonish little playthings by comparison. Every bush or tree or shadow seems to hide a pair of eyes, surrounding you, watching as you push on. The darkness is ready to reach out and grab hold, dragging you into oblivion, and we've only just begun. After a short fight with some Covenant stragglers, we return to the eerie silence, finding a facility that looks ready for combat. Like, room full of waist-high walls and a Gears of War game ready. But there's nobody to be seen. That doesn't mean you're alone, though, as a lift conveniently makes its way to where you're standing. That creeping sensation, the feeling that you're being watched, crawls back under your skin. Those Covenant, a moment ago, they looked like they were fighting someone. Or, more accurately, running away. This isn't Alien Isolation, for instance, where you know ahead of time what will be terrorizing you throughout the game. Instead, this sharp left turn into horror, alongside the unknown element of what lurks beneath the surface, means that you don't know what to expect. It could be the mimics from Prey, or Freddy Krueger, or anything. The game, your enemies, and whatever's killing them off all know more than you, putting everyone else in a position of power that inherently makes you vulnerable, because all you understand about this new terror is that you're walking into its lair. When the lift drops you off, you have a short section fighting the Covenant. You dispatch of the disorganized rabble, which is solely comprised of grunts and jackals, two of the weakest enemy species in the game, snipers aside. And when you travel through one door, you start to see a little more of what they were running from. Blood covers the walls, blood that you didn't spill, and your footsteps echo through the lifeless corridors. There's a room full of Covenant bodies, barricaded as though they were trying to keep something out. And when you step into a new area, a soldier is there, shooting at you, and crying that he won't let you turn him into one of those things. Red and blue blood coats the same surfaces. Humans and Covenant have seemingly fallen side by side, perhaps even fighting together against whatever's hidden down there, or at least more interested in survival than in the war that's ravaging the Milky Way. In a cutscene, you see that even Master Chief himself seems scared, spinning to see what's behind him as something cackles away off screen. And that's when you find what remains of those that you came here to rescue. All those questions you had, the uncertainty that meant you hesitated to charge through here like the mindless maniac that you were in those other levels, It's all answered when you watch what was captured by one soldier's body cam, and the sci-fi shooter becomes a found footage horror film. You've gone from sinister silence to shreds of combat cast across a canvas of terrifying environmental storytelling, and finally to this. You know that you're about to see what you've been so unsettled by, and you know that after that, it'll come for you. And sure enough, after a couple of clips of Key's men entering the facility and discovering the mutilated corpses of the Covenant elites that were absent in your earlier fights, the men enter the room where you found their remains, and the Flood are unleashed. Those same sounds that spooked Chief before become a horde of Flood infection forms, overwhelming the squad in just a matter of seconds. And now it's your turn. Before you've even encountered the Flood, they've been masterfully introduced, tearing away what you thought you knew about the game and flipping its genre on its head, highlighting how monumental this moment will turn out to be. Hundreds burst into the room, swarming you and trying to break into that Mjolnir armor, and once you've gotten used to mowing them down, the combat forms appear, launching themselves at you, trying to claw out all those juicy human innards. Even if you kill all of these, they can reanimate, stacking yet another layer of fear and paranoia onto the 6-foot wedding cake that's already weighing on your mind. But if you put them down, and they don't happen to get back up, you might take a closer look, only to uncover the existential dread that rides alongside the sheer alarm of fighting off an unspeaking, unfeeling pack of monstrosities. Because these things used to be human, or Covenant, until the Swarm took them. And if this should escape the facility, it could wreak havoc across the galaxy, consuming or brutally eliminating absolutely everything in its path. Except Master Chief, of course, because he simply cannot be stopped. This is a galactic threat to all life, but it only gets more terrifying as you progress through the level. And, given the state of this absolute abomination from Halo 2, through the series as a whole, the next step towards Miss Universe 2552 is the realization that the Flood can arm themselves, and if you're anything like me, you'll be in a state of pure panic as you try to escape, agonizing at the fact that you only seem to descend further and further into the facility, surrounded by enemies that are harder, better, faster, stronger, and more frequently equipped with rocket launchers than anything you've met thus far. Their silence is horrific. They are either one autonomous mind, absorbing those of your former allies and turning them against you, or sharing one perfect understanding, telepathically coordinating ambushes and destroying themselves to serve their one true purpose, killing you off. The silence of the combat forms also allows the music to hit with full effect, and it's an extremely unsettling contrast to the rest of the game's soundtrack. I mean, listen to the difference between these pre-Flood tracks and, of course, and the music that plays when the Flood first launch their assault, and the weighted silence of the last 10 minutes or so is overwhelmed by this. And this. It's unnatural, out of place, and so jarring by comparison to the rest of the game's sci-fi adventure romp and themes of wondrous discovery that your hairs stand on end. The Covenant are great enemies, but encountering these guys and this music was the first time in my playthrough that Halo felt like a truly intense, truly alien experience. And that perfect escalation, measured so delightfully as to change the tone of the entire game for the better, enhancing the stakes, the fear, and the general experience, is why the discovery of the Flood is my favourite moment in the series, and will perhaps never be surpassed. Thanks so much for watching. Have you guys played the original Halo? What did you think of the Flood? And if you haven't, do you think, based on this video, that you'd like to? Or perhaps I've put you off. Sorry about that. You can, of course, let me know in the comments below if you had any thoughts, and as always, I will see you next time.